In 3100 BC, a mysterious force sparked the rise of one of the greatest civilizations in history. But who truly built it? Was it the legendary Pharaoh Menes, or someone far older and more powerful? Uncover the untold origins of the immortal civilization that defied time, logic, and even death itself. This is the story they never wanted you to hear. Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot into the sands of an ancient world, a world that shouldn't have been able to exist. You're standing at the edge of the Nile River. Its surface, like black glass. Under a blazing copper sun, the air smells like crushed reeds, and dust birds cackle from the papyrus thickets. And behind you, the desert breathes dry and endless. But here's the thing, something isn't right. It's 3100 BC, and right in front of your very eyes, a civilization is being born, except it doesn't look like it's being built at all. It looks like it just appeared, fully formed, with temples already aligned to constellations, monuments carved so precisely you'd swear a laser had been involved, and a king named Narmer who seems to already know how to rule, like he's done this for lifetimes. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I always love seeing just how far this little bedtime rabbit hole travels now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 3100 BC, and you're not just visiting Egypt, you're stepping into a story that may not be entirely human. You trudge along a narrow canal as the sky bleeds. Orange papyrus boats glide silently, carrying priests in black paint and white linen. A child runs past naked, but wearing a tiny gold amulet of Horus. Like even toddlers need divine protection out here. You notice something. There's no fumbling, no trial and error, no oops, we're new to civilization vibe. Everything: roads, grain storage, irrigation, even government runs like a machine. Historians say this moment marks the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the legendary King Narmer. He's the guy with the famous Narmer palette, a piece of ceremonial stone art where he's seen clobbering enemies with a mace the size of a watermelon. According to mainstream history, this unification is the foundation of dynastic Egypt, which is neat. But you look closer, and the story starts to warp. There's no messy lead-up, no decades of wars, no flailing attempts at early city-building. Egypt just snaps into existence, with working systems, religion, solar calendars, geometry, papyrus scrolls, mummification, and a monarchy that claims divine descent. That's like waking up one morning and finding your 3-year-old niece already filing her taxes. In Latin, historians still argue whether this sudden rise was a natural evolution or something else. The problem is nothing about it feels gradual, and that makes people squirm. You wander into a village near what will someday be Memphis. The houses are made of mud brick, but the layout grid, like streets planned, wells perfectly dug and etched into walls. You see symbols, hieroglyphs, not proto-writing, full blown language already codified, no scribbled learning curve. Just BAM words, metaphor, syntax. Grammar. One mainstream theory suggests the Nile's predictable flooding gave Egypt a head start, stability that allowed quick growth. Sounds fair until you look at Mesopotamia. They had rivers too, and they did evolve gradually. Villages to city-states to empires. Egypt skipped the messy parts. Then there's the dynastic race theory. Fringe historians whisper that the first pharaohs weren't native at all, but outsiders, possibly from a lost advanced civilization, maybe even survivors of a global cataclysm. These shining ones, as some old texts describe them, arrived with tools, knowledge, and blueprints. According to some accounts, they weren't entirely mortal either. Of course, that theory was popular in the 19th century and has since been called out for having more colonial baggage than a steamship. Still, you can't help but notice how clean-cut the origin is. Like someone pressed start you past a stela, where Narmer's name is written in Serek, a palace facade, enclosing a falcon. That falcon? It's Horus, the god of kingship. Narmer's name isn't just a name, it's a statement. I rule in the divine's place from day one. Egyptian kings claim god blood, Now here's something strange in the Turin King list, an ancient papyrus that catalogs rulers. The earliest names belong to beings called the Shemsu-Hor, followers of Horus. They ruled before the first pharaohs for thousands of years. Some lists even say 13,000 years. Wait, what? That's older than agriculture. Some scholars dismiss it as myth. Others wonder if it's a memory of something real like Atlantis or a civilization swallowed by time. The Shemsu-Hor weren't just placeholders in dusty texts. They were said to have knowledge of astronomy, medicine, even star-mapped statues of them exist. Priests reference them in rituals to the Egyptians. These weren't legends. These were the ancestors, the blueprint bringers. As night falls, you notice something in the sky. The stars form perfect lines above the horizon. The temple you passed earlier aligned to Orion's belt, but that constellation wasn't even official. Yet you wonder who taught them to care. Fringe theorists point to the so-called Zep Tepi, the first time a mythical golden age, when gods ruled on earth. It's in temple inscriptions, it's in myths. The idea is that the world was once guided by beings of immense power and knowledge, and that Egypt wasn't their beginning, it was their restart button. You pause on a hilltop below the Nile coils, like a serpent under the moon. Fires flicker in the distance, priests chanting, farmers sleeping, crocodiles pretending to be logs. You feel something ancient tug at your thoughts, like you're not alone here, like something buried deep in these sands remembers more than it lets on. And somewhere, just barely audible over the wind, a voice seems to whisper, "We never left you." Follow the Nile upstream as the sun creeps over the horizon, its rays stabbing through the mist like golden spears. A long line of men moves along the riverbank, dressed in white linen and wrapped in silence. They carry palm branches and jars of oil at their head. On a platform adorned with lion skins and lapis lazuli stands a man, so still he barely seems alive. His skin glistens with resin. His crown is a towering red and white shape, symbolizing his rule over both Upper and Lower Egypt. This is Pharaoh, but not just any Pharaoh. This is one of the immortal kings, as later stories would call the men who reigned not for decades, but centuries, maybe more, according to the ancient Egyptian king lists, particularly the Palermo stone and the Turin papyrus. Some rulers before the First Dynasties ruled for hundreds or even thousands of years. One named Horus Ka is said to have ruled for 1,200 years. That's not a typo. Mainstream historians suggest this is symbolic, that the years could represent lunar cycles or reigns of different kings merged into one. But still, there's a strange consistency to these lifespans across multiple sources etched in granite and recorded with care. Historians still argue whether these long reigns reflect myth, mistranslation, or something lost in time. You duck into the shade of a stone column, its surface worn, but still bearing the eyes of the gods. All around you are carvings showing kings, not aging, always young, always muscular. Even Narmer, who should have grown old like anyone else, is never depicted with the wrinkle, eternal, untouched by time. And then there's Osiris, the god who died, was chopped up, buried, and yet still reigns. His story is more than myth. In Egypt, it's a blueprint. Die, rise, rule forever. Pharaohs were believed to become Osiris in death and Horus in life, a cycle of immortality, a divine succession that never really ended. You feel a chill. The idea wasn't just that pharaohs represented the gods. The ancient Egyptians believed that the king was a living deity. When he spoke, it was with divine authority. When he blinked, even that meant something. You walk through the ruins of Abydos, one of the oldest sacred cities in Egypt. The sand here is thick and soft, muffling your steps. You pass shrines older than memory. And then there it is, the Osirian, a subterranean chamber built of cyclopean granite blocks, so massive and precisely cut that even today nobody's sure how they were placed. The water beneath it still glistens, still reflects the stone, like a mirror into the past. Mainstream archaeology dates this to Setii's time, around 1290 BC, but here's the kicker: the construction style is unlike anything else from that period. It looks older, almost like it predates the rest of Egypt's known history. Fringe researchers argue the Osirian could be a remnant of a pre-dynastic high-tech culture, something carried over from the Zep Tepi the first time You crouch by the edge of the pool, fingertips brushing the surface. Its ice-cold goosebumps crawl up your arms. On the walls, strange symbols, some hieroglyphic, some geometric, others you just don't recognize. You wonder if the kings of Egypt, these immortal pharaohs, were ever buried here or born here. Then there's the story of Menes, also believed to be Narmer, Egypt's first unified king according to tradition. He ruled for over 60 years, survived an attack by a hippopotamus, and founded Memphis. But strangely, there's no definitive tomb, no mummy, just scattered references and legends. It's like he lived, ruled, vanished, and was never meant to be found. You lie back on the sand, staring up at the falcon-shaped clouds. Remember those followers of Horus, the Shemsu Hor? Some old tales suggest the First Dynasty kings were the last of these beings, hybrids of human and divine origin, half immortal, a blend of flesh and stardust. It sounds ridiculous until you think of something Egypt's earliest rulers didn't just claim divine, right? They enacted it from the start. Their entire court structure, ceremonial dress, even their breath, was treated as sacred. The palace wasn't just a palace, it was a living temple, no mortal mistakes allowed. And the process of becoming king, oh, it wasn't just putting on a fancy crown. It involved secret rituals, drinking sacred potions, spending nights locked alone in tombs to receive visions. Some records mention fasting, hallucinations, and communication with gods, or something that called itself a god. The early coronation rites were said to awaken a divine double, a part of the soul that connected the king to eternity. You couldn't just rule, you had to be transformed, recoded, you had to become immortal. Modern scientists say this was symbolic, psychological preparation, cultural theater. But if you were there really, they're walking through those firelit halls and listening to the low chants as the stars aligned overhead, you might think differently. You might believe they actually did it, that they found a way to cheat time. And if so, where did that knowledge come from? You sit by a weathered obelisk in Heliopolis, the city of the sun. A hawk soars overhead. Locals believed this place was the center of the world, the point where divine light touched the earth. The Benben stone, once housed here, was said to be the first object to rise from the primordial waters, maybe even a meteorite, a fragment of the gods. And here in the temple archives, scribes recorded lifespans, prophecies, and rituals from ages. Even they didn't understand. Some scrolls refer to beings called the Luminous, one's light-bodied kings, immortal watchers. You wonder if the immortal kings of Egypt were real, or if they were echoes, reincarnations, names reused by something older and smarter than flesh. The wind kicks up dust and carries a sound like whispers. The stones remember the now remembers, and somewhere out there maybe a pharaoh still walks Sunaged unseen, his footsteps stirring sand that's been quiet for 5,000 years. And the stars, those ever-watchful stars, blink overhead, as if winking at a secret you're not quite ready to learn. You wake just before dawn, the desert cold biting through your linen robe. Around you the landscape is quiet, but not empty. Looming ahead is a structure carved with strange symbols, and its blackened stone seems to hum under your bare feet. You've arrived at the Temple of Edfu. This is no ordinary temple. Its walls aren't just decorated, they're encrypted. Inside, hidden in plain sight, are stories that even ancient Egyptians found old. This place claims to preserve memories from a forgotten time when the gods walked on earth, bringing blueprints for civilization. The locals called it the House of the Falcon, but what it really holds is the building texts, inscriptions that don't just describe the past, but hint at who gave Egypt its knowledge. As you press your palm against the wall, cool stone meets your skin, and the story begins. The texts describe a time called Zep Tepi, the first time, a golden age ruled by divine beings. These weren't mythic tales for bedtime stories. The scribes of Edfu treated Zep Tepi like a historical fact. They wrote that before Egypt existed, a cosmic catastrophe destroyed an earlier world. Survivors from this disaster came down from a sky, landing on an island in the Nile. With them, they brought tools, not just physical ones, but intellectual ones: language, measurement, astronomy, agriculture, and law. You trace one of the symbols. It looks like a ship, but it's flying a celestial bark. Guided by beings with elongated heads and radiant eyes, the temple priests, said these builder gods, descended from the stars in luminous crafts, choosing the Nile, as their laboratory historians still argue whether these descriptions were metaphors or distorted memories of actual events. The standard view is that ancient myths symbolized natural cycles, the flood, rebirth, the stars. But why do the texts read more like engineering blueprints than allegory? One passage describes a primeval mound. Where the first structure was built, the mound wasn't dirt, it was stone set in geometrically perfect proportions, aligned with the stars of Orion. Sound familiar? You squint at the next row of glyphs. They mention the seven sages, entities, who helped shape the land to reflect the heavens. These weren't human. They were shining ones who communicated with vibration, mathematics, and light. And they had rules: sacred geometry, sacred angles, sacred silence. The temple text speaks of houses of fire and chambers of regeneration. One scholar, long dismissed by mainstream circles, argued these could refer to advanced energy centers. Some say they even describe anti-gravity technology. Far-fetched? Maybe. But again, why would farmers with copper chisels imagine this stuff? You duck into a smaller chamber, the smell of incense still lingering. A relief shows the god Thoth, scribe of the gods, handing down a tablet covered in spirals and stars to a kneeling man. That man isn't a god, he's a mortal, but he's receiving knowledge from above, like a cosmic USB stick being inserted into the human mind. The story plays out again and again in Egyptian texts, divine beings bestowing wisdom onto chosen humans. Sometimes it's Thoth, sometimes it's Osiris, sometimes a winged figure known only as he who measures the sky. What's consistent is that knowledge doesn't come from below, it's always handed down. And if you're wondering why the Egyptians placed such importance on the stars, it's because they believed the stars were where they came from. The do-it-there version of the afterlife wasn't under the ground, it was up there among Ra and Sirius. And the Milky Way, death wasn't a descent, it was an ascent outside. A priest chants under his breath. He wears leopard skin and carries a staff tipped with gold. He turns to you slowly and points to a wall near the temple's outer corridor. There, faded from the sun, is a depiction of what looks like, well, a machine, cylindrical, with what appears to be stabilizers connected to it. Are figures with ankh, symbols of life. And they're not walking, they're hovering. Modern Egyptologists chalk these images up to religious symbolism, but even among them there's a quiet unease about how advanced these depictions seem, how they don't fit the narrative of copper tools and trial and error building. You head back out into the courtyard. From this angle, the whole temple seems to pulse. Its structure is perfectly aligned north to south, east to west. Not even modern cities manage this kind of perfection. And this place was designed before writing even became widespread. You think of how Egypt's first buildings weren't crude huts or practice pyramids. They were perfect temples, precisely aligned. And you start to wonder, who were the architects really? The term Neteru appears often in temple inscriptions. It means gods, but not in the thunderbolt-throwing Zeus kind of way. The Neteru were described as forces, intelligences, even technicians of nature. Some were male, some female, some mechanical. Could it be that the gods of Egypt weren't myths, but memory? That the Temple of Edfu isn't a place of worship, but a manual? As the day begins to heat, you catch a final symbol carved deep into a shaded wall, a spiral surrounded by eye stars, and a throne. One scholar called it the Memory Vault. According to legend, it contains the records of Zep-Tepi, the knowledge of the builders, where no one knows, but many believe it's buried, hidden, locked beneath the sand. Maybe beneath the Sphinx, maybe under pyramids we haven't even found yet. You step back, blinking in the light. Did Egypt rise from the Nile, or did it reboot from the ashes of something far older, something not of this earth? You're not sure. But the blueprints are here, and something wanted you to find them. The sand stings your ankles as you cross the Giza Plateau, wind sweeping in low and dry, as if trying to erase the footprints of time. But nothing can erase the pyramids. They rise like frozen lightning bolts, stabbing at the sky, each face aligned to the cardinal points with eerie precision. And then there's the stone. You run your hand along the Great Pyramid's casing base, what little remains of the polished white. Limestone once so blinding it could be seen from miles away, but it's not the shine that matters, it's the weight each block weighs, between 2.5 and 15 tons. Some of the internal granite beams, imported from Aswan over 500 miles away, weigh up to 70 tons. You try to imagine dragging that through desert terrain with ropes and sheer willpower. Good luck. Mainstream historians claim Egypt built the pyramids using basic copper tools, ropes, wooden sledges, and a massive workforce, mostly skilled laborers, not slaves. Sure, there's evidence they were well fed and housed in temporary workers' villages nearby. But that doesn't explain the how, because here's the strange thing, there's no evidence of a learning curve. The step pyramid of Djoser, it's older and more experimental, but the jump from Djoser to the Great Pyramid is like going from stone tools to space shuttles. In one generation, historians still argue whether that leap is evidence of genius or something more unsettling. You head into the inner chambers. The passageways are narrow, suffocating. The air gets colder, damper. You run your hand along a granite wall inside the king's chamber. The surfaces are so precisely cut, so polished, they reflect light, and they're made from Aswan granite, a stone nearly impossible to carve using copper tools. And here's a detail that makes engineers squirm. The joints between stones are so tight, you can't even fit a razor blade between them. No mortar, just perfectly cut blocks, fit together with machine-level precision. And yet this was supposedly built 4,500 years ago by people with copper chisels and stone hammers. One fringe theory suggests sonic levitation. No joke. Some ancient legends speak of priests using sound chanting harmonics or vibrational technology to float stones into place. You might laugh until you hear the acoustics in the king's chamber. If you hum at the right frequency, the walls sing back a deep humming resonance that vibrates through your bones. You step into the sarcophagus, a giant stone box carved from a single piece of granite. It doesn't have a lid, it doesn't contain a body. In fact, no mummy has ever been found inside the Great Pyramid, and there are no inscriptions, not one hieroglyph, which is weird considering Egyptians loved to write everything: names, curses, prayers, lunch menus. So what was this thing? For some say it was never a tomb, that it was an energy device, part of a complex system harnessing Earth's natural frequencies. Others argue it was an initiation chamber designed to alter consciousness. Think ancient sensory deprivation tank, but way spookier. And the more you look, the weirder it gets. The dimensions of the Great Pyramid seem to encode astronomical and geophysical constants, like the speed of light, the dimensions of Earth, even pi, and the golden ratio. Was this coincidence, numerology, run wild, or intentional design? Historians still argue whether the builders truly understood these numbers, or whether we're reading too much into it. But it's a lot of coincidences for one pile of rocks. Then there's the stone itself. Egyptologists claim the builders used copper chisels to cut millions of limestone and granite blocks, but ancient tool marks were visible, suggest a different story. Circular saw marks, core drill holes, some with spirals so tight and precise that modern diamond-tipped drills struggled to match them. And yes, you can still see those marks on artifacts in museums. If you know where to look, you squat down near a half-buried block. At the base of the pyramid, the edges are sharp. No signs of chipping, no signs of trial and error, just precision. It's like whoever cut this didn't make mistakes. You remember that time you tried assembling IKEA furniture? Yeah, this isn't that. Nearby lies the so-called unfinished obelisk in Aswan, a 1,200-ton monolith, still attached to bedrock. It cracked during cutting and was abandoned, but the tool marks left behind smooth curved gouges, as if carved by a massive rotary blade, not a chisel. The real kicker, the granite in Aswan is so hard, about a 6.5 on the Mohs scale. It eats copper. So how did they cut it? Cue the fringe theories: lost high-tech civilizations, ancient nuclear saws, even alien intervention. But even if you don't buy those, the evidence of unknown technology is undeniable. Something's missing from the official narrative, something big. You climb back out, dizzy from the damp stillness. Outside, the heat hits you like a wall. You shield your eyes and gaze up. The three pyramids of Giza line up with Orion's belt not just loosely, but almost perfectly including the slight offset of the third star. And remember, the Orion constellation was central to Egyptian cosmology. They believed the soul of the pharaoh traveled to Orion after death. The pyramids weren't just tombs, they were launch pads. What kind of society builds a monument that functions as a star map, a resonance chamber, and possibly a power plant all at once? A civilization with instructions. Instructions from where the wind kicks up a fine cloud of sand, and for a moment the desert blurs. You can almost see them, beings of light, standing where workers once stood, holding tools, not yet invented, carving stone, with sound aligning structures, with the stars not for beauty, but for memory, because these weren't just buildings, they were reminders of who built them, and maybe of when they'll return. The sand shifts under your feet as you approach the lion-shaped colossus, its gaze fixed eternally on the eastern horizon. The great Sphinx stares into the rising sun with weathered eyes, as if waiting for something or someone. You pause. This isn't just a statue, it's a secret keeper. Up close, the Sphinx is far more massive than pictures can prepare you, for its body is carved from a single ridge of limestone bedrock, nearly 240 feet long and 66 feet high. Its face, although eroded, still carries the aura of something watching, but watching what? Here's the twist. Mainstream scholars date the Sphinx to around 2500 BC, during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. It's conveniently close to the date of the second pyramid, which is attributed to him. Seems neat. But when you look deeper, really deeper, the mystery begins to unravel. First, the weathering. The Sphinx's body shows deep vertical erosion patterns, not from wind or sand, but from water, torrential rain. And here's the kicker. The last time Egypt saw heavy, sustained rainfall like that was before 7000 BC. Geologists like Robert Schoch have argued that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx suggest it's thousands of years older than its supposed builder. Historians still argue whether these patterns are from water, wind, or something else entirely. But the geological data doesn't lie. Something's off. You kneel near the Sphinx's paws, where a small temple was built. Between them sits the dream stele erected by Pharaoh Thutmose, for on it he describes falling asleep in front of the Sphinx as a young prince and receiving a vision, the Sphinx speaking to him, offering the throne if he would dig it out of the sand. Think about that. Even in Thutmose's time, 1400 BC, the Sphinx was already ancient, half buried, and talking in dreams. But it gets weirder. You shuffle toward a fenced-off area to the south, where rumors swirl about hidden chambers beneath the paws. The idea of a subterranean room isn't just fringe fantasy, it was actually confirmed. In the 1990s, ground-penetrating radar, conducted by both Egyptian authorities and independent researchers, revealed anomalies, rectangular voids directly beneath the Sphinx. Were they natural cavity storage rooms? Something more no one knows. For sure, the Egyptian government has since blocked further excavation. But ancient legends speak of what lies below the Hall of Records, said to be a hidden library left by the gods or the survivors of a lost civilization. Inside knowledge from the first time, the secrets of Atlantis, star maps, lost technology, you name it. The Temple of Edfu, remember, that described these records being buried near the lion-shaped guardian of the sacred land. That's not even subtle. You slide your fingers along a stone near the Sphinx's flank. The texture is different, less eroded, as if touched more recently. The idea begins to gnaw at you. What if the Sphinx isn't just old but reused, modified? Maybe its head was once a lion, later recarved into a human face. That would explain why the head looks disproportionately small. And it does. Once you notice it, you can't unsee it. The body is massive, bulky, imposing. The head tiny, stylized, almost like an afterthought. Some scholars speculate that the original lion-shaped statue predates dynastic Egypt, that it was a symbol of the constellation Leo, built during a time when the spring equinox aligned with it around 10,500 BC, which not so coincidentally is when the pyramid's alignment with Orion's belt is also most accurate. So now we have an astronomical clock embedded in stone. A celestial alignment, water erosion, and underground chambers. We're not allowed to enter. You start Connecting the dots, you climb a dune behind the Sphinx, panting slightly. From this angle the structure looks alert, like it's waiting for a signal, or guarding something sacred. You imagine digging into the bedrock, dust pouring out of a long sealed chamber inside. Maybe there's a library, not scrolls, but crystalline tablets, holographic projectors, or some kind of tech we wouldn't even recognize. Not flashy alien gear, but simple, elegant devices designed to preserve knowledge forever, and maybe, just maybe, someone locked it away on purpose, not for us to find. Not yet. You think back to that dream steel. Why did the Sphinx offer power only to those who honored and revealed it? What if every attempt to unearth the truth has been met with resistance, because we're not ready for what's buried there? As the sun climbs higher, casting sharp shadows over the Sphinx's face, you feel something watching you, not in a creepy way, more like a teacher quietly judging a student's progress, waiting for the moment when you've learned enough to be given the next piece of the puzzle. Some say the Hall of Records will only open when humanity reaches a certain level of consciousness, when we're no longer obsessed with power, but with understanding that knowledge, real knowledge, is a test. You descend the dune, your feet sinking into the warming sand. The wind carries a whisper again, just like back at Edfu, but this time it's clearer. It says, beneath stone lies memory, beneath memory truth. And maybe the real question isn't what is under the Sphinx, but why it's still waiting. Because if the Great Pyramid is the blueprint, the Sphinx is the key. You find yourself walking the dusty path between Saqqara and Giza, wind in your ears, sun beating against your back. The further you go, the quieter it gets. Not the kind of quiet that relaxes you, but the kind that feels watched. You've come looking for the workers, because surely someone somewhere left behind a clue about who actually built all this. Millions of stone blocks, perfectly aligned monuments, causeways, temples, and sacred enclosures don't just stack themselves. But here's where it gets bizarre. According to mainstream Egyptology, the Great Pyramid was built by tens of thousands of laborers, well-fed, well-organized, and working year-round in shifts. There's even a workers' village excavated near Giza. Seems airtight, right? Except when you walk through what remains of that village, something's off. Yes, the homes are real, the pottery bones and bread ovens all there, but the scale doesn't add up. The volume of manpower needed to carve, transport, and precisely place more than 2 million blocks would have required not just a large city, but a sprawling industrial complex. And yet the surrounding infrastructure is minimal. Then there's the silence you'd expect: records, graffiti, complaints, maybe even a sarcastic note. Khufu can take this job and shove it. But nothing, no detailed logs of construction techniques, no personal notes from engineers, just void. Now imagine this. You're standing in the shadow of the Great Pyramid. You close your eyes and listen, not just with your ears, but with your skin. There are stories, ancient ones, that say the pyramids were not built by human hands alone. Some texts mention the builders without breath. They appear in the temple myths and funerary texts as servants of the gods, silent, obedient, tireless, not mortals, something else. Some call them Sahu beings, a term that shows up in the pyramid texts. These beings didn't eat, didn't sleep, and never spoke. They simply built. Fringe theorists have interpreted these as machines, automata, or even early descriptions of artificial intelligence. Is it possible that the Great Pyramid wasn't built with just manpower, but with help from non-biological entities? It sounds absurd until you realize how much we don't know. You climb the edge of a crumbled wall at the edge of the workers' site. Below, the faint remains of long corridors stretch out in the sand. Some lead nowhere, others end in sharp corners, and doors sealed tight with no inscriptions. Why build a structure with no clear purpose, unless it wasn't meant for humans? There's also the strange issue of time. The Great Pyramid's construction, according to traditional estimates, would have required placing one block every 2.5 minutes, without stopping for 20 years straight. That's 24/7, no holidays, no errors. And these aren't Lego bricks. These are 2 to 15-ton stones that needed to be carved, transported, raised, and set perfectly. Even with modern cranes, that would be a logistical nightmare. Historians still argue whether this time frame is realistic or based on optimistic guesswork. Some say it was possible with extreme organization, others call it mathematical fantasy. So, how was it done? A few miles from Saqqara, you find an old tomb carved into bedrock. Inside, the air is musty thick, with millennia-old decay. But there's a scene etched on the wall that stops you in your tracks. It shows men dragging a massive statue using ropes, but above them hovers a strange orb-like object. It radiates lines, energy, sound waves, vibration. You tilt your head. Is this art or a diagram? You remember an obscure legend that speaks of priests who could lift stone by chanting the names of the gods. Some accounts, even into the Greco-Roman period, describe Egyptian initiates using harmonic rods to manipulate matter, sound as a tool, vibration as force. Could the builders, without breath, have used this technology? Maybe the reason there's no graffiti, no struggle, no chaos is because the construction wasn't manual, it was orchestrated like a silent symphony of energy and purpose. And what about the sarcophagi? You descend into the Serapeum of Saqqara, a corridor of massive stone boxes buried beneath the ground. Each sarcophagus weighs over 70 tons, with lids as heavy as a freight train. They sit in niches carved so precisely into the rock, you could swear lasers were involved. Who built this? Why? And why are they empty? Some Egyptologists say they were tombs for sacred bulls, but there are no bull remains in most of them, no inscriptions, no offerings, just silence, as if they were meant to contain something not of flesh, something dangerous or sacred, or both. You run your fingers along the polished granite mirror. Smooth. This isn't beginner's work, this is mastery. Some engineers who've studied these boxes admit that recreating them today would be extremely expensive and time-consuming, even with diamond tools. So, who were the true builders? And more importantly, where are they now? Because you notice something else: the statues of laborers, the carvings of kings, they're all over Egypt. But the builders themselves, missing no mass graves, no family records, no signs of their day-to-day lives beyond a handful of skeletal remains near Giza. If hundreds of thousands of men built Egypt's greatest wonders, they left a shockingly small footprint. You sit down in the shade of a limestone wall, heart still racing. You think of the sahus, the chanting, the vibrational tools, the sealed tombs with no purpose, and that eerie phrase again: builders without breath, not slaves, not humans, but something else entirely. And if they were made by whom? As you rise, a gust of wind sweeps through the passage, carrying the smell of age and mystery. The sun dips behind the pyramid, casting the long shadow of a structure built by invisible hands. And you wonder, maybe the builders didn't disappear, maybe they're just waiting. You sit under the lengthening shadow of a palm tree near Abydos, that forgotten city at the edge of Egypt's religious spine. The sand's a little cooler now, but the weight of everything you've seen is only getting heavier. You've looked under pyramids, walked through silent tombs, and whispered to stones, but the question still breathes down your neck: who is behind all this? Not the pharaohs, not fully, not the workers, not really. But maybe a god, and not just any god, one who writes reality, one who remembers forever. His name is Thoth. Now here's the official take. Thoth is the ibis-headed god of writing, wisdom, time, and magic. The Greeks later equated him with Hermes, which tells you a lot. Messenger of the gods, master of secrets, the guy you definitely don't want to forget your password around. But ancient Egyptian texts go deeper. They call Thoth the one who invented writing, the one who measured the heavens, the one who stood beside the sun god Ra in the eternal bark, writing down the deeds of gods and men alike. You feel your breath catch a little, because this isn't just a scribe we're talking about. This is a programmer of reality. And guess what? There are whispers, very old, very strange whispers, that Thoth wasn't just divine, he was physical, that he walked among humans, taught them things they weren't meant to know, gave them language, science, astronomy, maybe even immortality. Historians still argue whether Thoth is purely myth or a deified memory of a real teacher, perhaps one who arrived from elsewhere long before dynasties began. Now picture this. You're inside the Temple of Seti I, where the ceiling rolls like a galaxy frozen in blue. Stone constellations dance overhead, and there in a side chamber you find a peculiar inscription Thoth twice great, and elsewhere Thoth thrice great sound familiar. Yeah, that's Hermes Trismegistus. The Greeks believed Thoth and Hermes were the same being, and from that belief came a body of mystical knowledge, the Hermetic texts. These writings would later influence alchemy, astrology, and esoteric science for centuries. The Emerald Tablet, the phrase, as above, so below, all attributed to Thoth. But there's one text hidden, feared, rumored, that beats them all. The Book of Thoth legend says it contains the spells to control the heavens, speak with animals, and resurrect the dead. It's said to have been written in Thoth's own hand, perhaps even on indestructible papyrus, sealed in a golden box, and hidden in a secret tomb no one's ever found. Or maybe you're not supposed to find it. There's an old tale in which a priest discovers the Book of Thoth buried beneath the Nile, in a box of iron floating in a sea of serpents. He reads it, learns too much, and is driven mad, his mind cracking open like a melon left in the sun. You rub your temples. The air here feels heavier, because if Thoth was real, and if he actually walked among the ancient Egyptians, then maybe the secrets of their civilization weren't invented. Maybe they were downloaded. Look around, the astronomical alignments of the pyramids, the way temples echo the human body, the obsession with balanced duality, eternal cycles. It's almost as if someone encoded cosmic truths into the very stones. And then there's the oddest bit of all, what the ancients believed about memory. They didn't trust writing. Not entirely. Thoth himself was blamed for introducing it. Some myths say writing would weaken the human mind, making people lazy thinkers. It would allow memory to fade. Real wisdom, they claimed, was meant to be lived, not archived. So why did Thoth give it to them? Unless he wasn't trying to preserve their memory, but his own a way to keep himself alive generation after generation, long after his body, if he even had one, turned to dust. A god who feared being forgotten, hiding himself in glyphs, temples, myths. You walk through the ruins of a chapel near Aswan where the walls whisper things, not literally, but it feels that way, a strange harmonic in the stone, like it wants to tell you something if you just press your ear close enough. And now you remember the story of the 7 sacred words. Thoth was said to have spoken them once, only once, and the sky itself cracked. The Nile changed direction. A temple vanished. The words were recorded in secret and scattered through Egypt, never to be read aloud, because reading them might wake something up, or worse, bring it back. You look at the ibis birds in the distance, their curved beaks like calligraphy, pens drawing lines into the sand. They're sacred to Thoth, of course, always nearby, always watching. A chill runs up your arms. Because if Thoth really was here teaching, guiding, writing, then maybe he left more than symbols. Maybe he left instructions, and maybe, just maybe, we're following them without even knowing it. Your sandals crunch over the scorched stone of a crumbled temple courtyard somewhere just beyond Saqqara. The wind hisses through broken pillars, and a falcon screams overhead, circling like it's guarding something that doesn't want to be rediscovered. And you realize something's been quietly bothering you this whole journey. It's not the architecture, not the tombs, not even the gods. It's the timing. See, the rise of ancient Egypt wasn't slow, it wasn't gradual. It wasn't the messy climb from scattered mud huts to mighty temples that you'd expect over thousands of years. It just appeared, bam, around 3100 BC. Egypt explodes into full-blown civilization, monumental architecture, political centralization, a fully developed writing system, advanced irrigation, calendar systems, burial rituals, math, medicine, and hey, just for fun, let's throw in complex astronomical alignments, almost like somebody hit Start Civilization EXE and skipped the tutorial. Mainstream scholars will tell you it was a culmination of Neolithic cultures in the Nile Valley, that people developed farming, settled down, formed small chiefdoms, and slowly unified into a kingdom reasonable enough. But here's the catch. Archaeologically, we don't see a long, messy learning curve. We don't see hundreds of prototypes, no series of half-built ziggurats or crude proto-pyramids, no baby-step temples with progressively better construction. One day it's pre-dynastic graves, the next it's step pyramids with perfect cardinal alignments. Historians still argue Whether this is because evidence simply hasn't survived, or if we're staring at a civilizational jump start unlike anything else in human history. You pause by a fallen stone slab, its hieroglyphs still crisp. And here's where things get weird. The earliest dynasties, the so-called Old Kingdom, were more advanced in some ways than what came centuries later. Craftsmanship declined, building precision dropped, the blocks got smaller, the math got sloppier. That's right, as time passed things got worse, not better. That's not how civilization is supposed to work, unless the peak came first, unless whoever launched Egypt's golden age wasn't planning to stick around. Take Imhotep, for example, architect of the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, right? Supposedly a human genius, but the design he created was so complex and flawless that many scholars now think it couldn't have been the first of its kind. There had to be practice trials, failed attempts, except there aren't any. It's like he had blueprints handed to him by something or someone who'd done this before. And while we're at it, let's talk about that famous 365-day calendar. Ancient Egyptians were using it around 3000 BC, 12 months, 3 seasons, intercalary days, to sync with the solar year. Modern, right? But how the heck did a farming civilization nail the solar cycle with that level of precision before most of the world had figured out a basic harvest chart? Oh, and their constellations already mapped. The Orion correlation theory, controversial but compelling, suggests that the 3 main pyramids of Giza align almost perfectly with Orion's belt, not just in layout, but in scale and position relative to the Nile, mimicking how the stars relate to the Milky Way. That's an astronomical map carved into stone that you can only fully recognize from the sky. You squint up at the sun, try to imagine what kind of mind looks down from orbit and says, yeah, let's mirror that on Earth. But hold on, you're not just staring at some cosmic art project. This stuff had meaning. The ancient Egyptians believed the pharaoh's souls traveled to Orion after death, that the gods came from there. So what if those star alignments aren't just myth? What if they were instructions? More than one researcher, not just fringe types, either has noticed this weird pattern. The earliest Egyptian accomplishments are the most perfect, the most mysterious, the hardest to replicate. It's like a civilization starting at the end of its story and slowly forgetting who it was. There's even a term for it, cultural amnesia. Some believe Egypt may have inherited the ruins and knowledge of a pre-Egyptian civilization, something so old, so lost, that it only exists in traces, legends, impossible stones, and the sudden appearance of knowledge that shouldn't have existed. Ancient astronaut theorists, oh, they love this part. They think Egypt was built on technology given by beings from elsewhere, maybe even the survivors of a lost global cataclysm. Meanwhile, archaeologists politely cough and talk about sediment layers, but the question refuses to die. How do you start with perfection and then forget how you did it? You step into a half-buried tomb and run your fingers along a carving of Osiris, the lord of the underworld, the god who died and returned, the one said to have taught agriculture, law, and order before his tragic dismemberment. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? A divine being bringing civilization only to vanish and leave behind confused humans clinging to scraps of memory and sacred stories, a being worshipped not just for his power, but for his knowledge. The pattern keeps repeating. Egypt wasn't just a kingdom. It was a legacy, a candle lit from a flame much older and deeper than we're willing to admit. And as the stars come out flickering like ancient code in the sky, you start to wonder, maybe we didn't build Egypt. Maybe we just moved in the desert. Wind howls louder tonight. Grit bites at your face as you press forward across the sands, chasing a trail long buried, one not of pyramids or pharaohs, but of something far more elusive. The ones who left, not the invaders, not the conquerors, not the archaeologists, the ones who were here before Egypt's golden age, and then were suddenly gone. Because here's what's strange, many ancient records, Egyptian, Mesopotamian, even later Hebrew and Greek texts, speak of a time when great beings, sometimes called gods, sometimes watchers, sometimes the shining ones, walked among mortals. They brought wisdom, order, architecture, language, and then one day they departed, vanished like mist in morning sun. You stand at the edge of what used to be the city of Abydos, a sacred place dedicated to Osiris, But buried beneath the temples and tombs is something deeper literally and symbolically, underground chambers that were sealed up in ancient times, hieroglyphs that hint at a time before kings, when a different kind of ruler held the throne. Some say these pre-dynastic pharaohs were not human. The Egyptian king list from the Temple of Seti includes a bizarre section of rulers labeled the Shem-Sahor, or followers of Horus. These weren't metaphorical titles. They were described as physical beings, real, long-lived, and oddly radiant. And here's the kicker: they supposedly reigned for thousands of years. Mainstream Egyptologists say this is myth, symbolic, a way to honor the gods. But that's where things get muddy, because those same records list the transition from gods to men like it was a historical event with actual dates. Historians still argue whether these ancient lists are just ritual storytelling, or if they accidentally preserved fragments of something much older, a civilization before civilization. You duck into the cool mouth of a hidden chamber, carvings dance in the torchlight, ships sailing across stars, winged beings watching from the heavens, tall figures handing tools to smaller, awestruck humans. One fringe theory, stay with me, claims there was an exodus, but not the one you're thinking of, not Moses and plagues. This was something deeper, a departure of the gods. Some researchers point to ancient catastrophes, massive floods, climate collapse, or comet impacts as the event that drove these beings away, or underground, like a mass evacuation, not because they were losing, but because humans weren't ready. Imagine you're them. You see the planet build pyramids that sing with the stars, give people just enough knowledge to build a society. And then when chaos comes, you leave, letting them stumble forward on their own like toddlers learning to walk. There's even a theory, and yeah, it's wild, that the pyramids were part of this exit, stargates, resonators, portals encoded with frequencies that only activate under certain cosmic conditions, that their perfect alignments weren't just symbolic but functional, like escape hatches. Far-fetched, sure, but let's stay in the realm of what we know. Around the end of Egypt's Old Kingdom, things fell apart. Climate change dried up, the Nile crops failed, political order crumbled, and suddenly silence. We call it the First Intermediate Period, and it was like someone yanked the plug on an empire that had been running like clockwork for centuries. The central government vanished, temples were abandoned, even pyramid construction stopped cold. And here's the eerie part: many of the sacred texts written later during Egypt's reboot periods look backward longingly toward the Zep Tepi, the first time, a mythical golden age when gods ruled the earth. But they're not treated like fairy tales. They're treated like something real that was lost, something that might one day return. That's the thing about Egypt. It wasn't just obsessed with death and the afterlife. It was obsessed with cyclical time, with repetition, with return. It believed the end would always circle back to the beginning, which means the gods weren't gone forever. They were just waiting somewhere. And here's a twist that might keep you up tonight. Ancient astronaut theorists love to point to one particular stela, an engraved stone in the Temple of Edfu that describes the rebuilding of civilization after a great flood, using plans passed down from the gods. The text refers to the primeval ones as the architects of the original structures lost in cataclysm. So was ancient Egypt a reboot? Were the pharaohs just caretakers, preserving what little remained? You gaze up at the stars, Orion sparkles above you, Sirius pulses in the east, the same skies that those first stargazers saw. And if they left, the next question is obvious. Where did they go? One idea: they went underground. Literally, countless tunnels lie beneath the pyramids, under the Sphinx, under Luxor, and they remain sealed, forbidden, unexplored. What's down there we don't know, but old legends warn of sleeping kings, hidden libraries, and machines that hum with ancient energy. Another theory: they went off-world, returned to the stars, to the place they came from, or to the place they watch us from now, waiting for the next cycle to begin. And here you are, a tiny figure in a vast desert, listening to whispers from sand and stone. But now, as the wind stills and the temperature drops, you feel something new, not fear, not our anticipation, because if they left once, they might come back. And this time, maybe we'll be ready. The evening air turns cool as you stand before the enigmatic temple of Hathor at Dendera, its walls covered in carvings that look more like sci-fi schematics than religious iconography. You trace the lines with your finger, curious how these ancient artisans encoded secrets into stone that still baffle researchers. Today, inside the famous dendrolite reliefs depict what some interpret as giant bulbs powered by serpentine coils, something akin to electrical lamps centuries before electricity was discovered. Egyptologists dismissed these images as purely symbolic, representing lotus flowers and snakes. But the mystery lingers like desert dust in the air. The Great Pyramid and Sphinx might be the loudest monuments, but it's here, hidden in plain sight, that the whispers of an advanced immortal civilization echo. Most clearly, the Egyptians were master storytellers, and their stories are coded layers of history, theology, and possibly technology lost to time. You recall the debates among scholars about the Dendera zodiac, a celestial map carved on the ceiling, which aligns the cycles of the sun, moon, and planets. With astonishing accuracy, the sophistication suggests a civilization that understood cosmic mechanics in a way modern science only recently rediscovered. Some fringe researchers argue these depictions are proof of an ancient power grid or advanced knowledge of energy manipulation, perhaps passed down from a vanished civilization that predates the pharaohs by thousands of years. Historians still argue whether such theories are imaginative speculation or clues to a forgotten truth. You walk past rows of statues, their eyes seemingly alive, reflecting the fading light. They are guardians of a secret knowledge, keepers of an ancient technology that defies explanation. The sheer scale and precision of Egypt's monuments speak to a civilization that mastered stone, sound, and light. Some believe the pyramids functioned as energy conductors, possibly harnessing natural earth vibrations or celestial energies. Theories of sonic levitation, hidden chambers aligned with stars, and encoded mathematical constants suggest the builders were working with principles we are only beginning to comprehend. And then there is the question of immortality. Egyptian culture obsessively pursued eternal life, not just in spirit, but potentially in physical form. The myths of resurrection, transformation, and rebirth point to knowledge that transcended mere religious belief. Were the pharaohs truly gods, or were they holders of a secret science? Some legends tell of rituals and technologies that allowed individuals to transfer consciousness or preserve life in ways science today cannot explain. Could the pyramids and temples have been part of that technology, gates to other dimensions or stages of existence? As the moon rises over the desert, casting silver shadows across ancient stones, you feel the weight of all you've learned. The evidence is compelling. Egypt's civilization was no ordinary society. It was the product of knowledge so advanced, so deep, it may have come from beyond the stars, or from a lost epoch of human history. And the mystery remains, who really built ancient Egypt? The builders, without breath, the teachers. From the stars, the immortal ones hiding in plain sight. You take a deep breath, the desert night cool against your skin, and realize this is not the end of the story. It's only the beginning. The desert quiets, the stars stretch endlessly above, distant and eternal. Your heartbeat slows, your thoughts drift like the gentle sands under moonlight. The mysteries you've uncovered tonight hover softly around you like ancient whispers. Just beyond hearing, there's comfort in not knowing, in letting the stories settle like dust on forgotten stones. The pyramids stand tall, timeless sentinels, guarding secrets wrapped in silence. The Sphinx watches patiently, its gaze steady and unreadable. And beneath the sands, the halls and chambers wait, untouched by time's chaos. You don't have to solve the puzzle tonight. The builders' secrets are theirs to keep. For now, what matters is the journey you took, stepping lightly alongside history's shadows. So let your mind rest. Picture the cool desert breeze, the faint hum of stones vibrating softly, the slow dance of stars across the sky. Maybe the past is not a locked door, but a path we walk slowly, sometimes stumbling, always learning. Tomorrow the sun will rise again. The story will continue, waiting patiently for you to return. Now close your eyes breathe in the quiet, and drift gently into dreams. If you find this story topic interesting, please leave a comment below. Hello everyone, in today's story,